Hello everybody, this is Kim Peterson from InterDyn BMI. We're having some technical difficulties, so I do apologize for that. I'm in the dark, so Brian, I am sorry, I'm going to have to go ahead and hand it over to you. Today's presentation is What's in Dynamics GP 2016 R2. So Brian, if you could go ahead and take it away. I'll continue to try to get this figured out, but let's show your screen, okay?
Okay, you should be able to see it. Does it look okay, Kim?
I can't see it.
Okay, all right.
Brian, I can see
yeah.
it. This is Kayla Joe.
Okay, so it's maybe just Kim. So, okay, we'll assume Kim's having even more problems. So, Kim, you're right, you're in the dark. So, okay, so we think then everybody should be able to see it. So, hello everyone. Kim usually does a 5 or 8 minute commercial, so we're really still on time as far as the actual content of what we wanted to talk about today. So welcome to the webinar. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes or so on what's new in Dynamics GP 2016 R2. Before we actually get into the feature list, I wanted to put the roadmap for Dynamics GP up. Of course, Microsoft usually doesn't publish this out more than a couple of years because technology changes very, very rapidly, I think, as most of you know. And so it's difficult to say what 5 years looks like because in the technology world that's like 50 years. So kind of like the dog years and human years, there's a big difference between the calendar count and how technology moves forward. And so, but what we see is 2016 R2, which was released in December of 2016, and so the feature set is smaller, but they did want to get it out in the hands of users, and so we only have 20 features in R2, so it's not a huge feature release, but that said, they are already working on GP 2018, and you'll see in the second to the right column there, GP 2018 will ship sometime late this calendar year, and so I suspect probably that November or early December timeframe of calendar 2017 we'll have the GP 2018 release. And there are a few things that Microsoft is you know, that they're working on that they want to do to the product, but a lot of the features that are going to go into GP 2018 are going to come from customers, from end users of Microsoft Dynamics GP. And so this is really the first time that they're dedicating the bulk of the money that gets spent on the release to customer wish list items. And so if you have something that you would really like them to consider, it's a good idea to let us know, and that could be anyone at InterDyn BMI that you work with. Anybody you know, tell them that you've got a feature, how do I get that to Microsoft, and we can get you the information. You actually go to a special web page that Microsoft has called Connect, and they will take your feature. You can also see features that other customers have put into Connect, and you can vote on those features. So if you see something that you think would really help you and be a big time saver and something that you've wanted, maybe you haven't thought of, you can vote on that as well. And so those things that get the most votes get into the program. And so that's what we're going to expect for 2018 are really the bulk of those features coming from us, from people that have their hands on the software every day. Okay, so moving on to the actual list of features. Like I said, there's 20. I know in the upper right-hand corner of the slide it says 25 plus. They did cut it off at 22, but 2 of them are not really features, and so in my opinion there's only 20. Sometimes marketing will find a way to increase that to a higher count, but In real life, there's only 20 new things, but some of these are big. The first one is bank reconciliation. So right now, as most of you know, if you've been using GP for a while, bank reconciliation does not have any historical transactions like we do in General Ledger when we close the year and move things to history, and payables, receivables, inventory, and so forth. Everything in bank rec is considered current. And so in 2016 R2, they have added the feature to actually move reconciled transactions and voided transactions into a historical table. And so, well, why after 20 years would they do that? It's really just performance. And so people have been on the software for long periods of time, know that sometimes when you run a check register or any of the banking type reports, some of those take a little while to process, including the actual reconciliation window itself, because Dynamics GP has to sort through all those transactions to find what you're requesting or what you might want to have in the reconcile window. And so this is really just a performance thing that they're dealing with. It doesn't do anything else. It's really just to speed up all of those reports and the actual reconciliation. And so there's a routine, so tools, routines, and you might think it's under financial because that's where the reconciliation and bank transfer and so forth are. Well, it's not. It's just tools, routines, reconciled transaction maintenance. So it has its separate menu item now. It's out there on its own. And then this window opens up and you can decide what you want to move into history. And of course you can do this by checkbook. So if you have questions or need some help the first time through doing that, just let us know. But this is kind of a nice feature because it does really kind of streamline and speed up the whole banking process. The next item is just as big, in my opinion. So today, if there's a batch that someone has open and you go to do something with the batch, like post it, it'll say this batch is being edited by another user. And that's good. If there's only 3 or 4 of you in the office and you're all sitting there together, you can quickly determine who the other user is. But you know, if you have 100 users in your system and they're spread over 4 or 5 or 10 different locations across the nation, sometimes it's not so easy to figure out this batch is being edited by another user. Well, who's the other user? We don't know. And so finally, and this is so logical, but finally we have in the system in 2016 R2 now the message that the batch is being edited will actually say who the user is. And so I'm sure that only took like 5 minutes to code that up, but it just seems like now that we have it, it's like, oh yeah, that would have been good 20 years ago. But nevertheless, very, very nice to know who the batch is being edited by. So in this case, you can ping Jody and say, close the batch window or close the transaction window that's holding the batch, and then you can go in and do your thing. So a small thing, but very big when it comes to end users. The next item is a little less appreciated, I guess, but if you use requisitions and purchase orders in Dynamics GP, this will resonate, I think. But today, prior to 2016 R2, if you were to cancel a purchase order line item when it was linked to a requisition, or if you were to try, you couldn't. And so in 2016 R2, it does allow you to actually cancel a PO line item. So if you're not going to get it, or if for some reason you decide that you're canceling it regardless if there's an approved requisition out there, Dynamics GP 2016 R2 then will actually allow you to cancel that line item. And so it does throw up a warning, but you know, it's telling you that it's linked to a requisition, and if you cancel this, that you cannot then change your mind and go back and relink it to the requisition. And so that's fair. Fair warning. If we decide that that's still what we want to do and we continue, then we can cancel the line item, and that does disconnect that from the approved requisition. Now we'll see in a couple of slides what the requisition user then sees, because obviously it has to write something back telling the requester, you're not getting this. And so I should have put that slide next, but I didn't. But the next one is another little kind of nice feature that doesn't really add a huge piece of functionality to Dynamics, but something that's much more practical. And so right now, if you go to enter an invoice, so either from sales order processing or from receivables, but if you put an invoice into a customer account and the customer's over their credit limit, you'll get the familiar message that the customer's exceeded their credit limit, and then you can either click continue to bypass it, or if you have security set up that you don't want this bypassed, then the software actually asks for a password for the user to continue. And so, and those still work, but today there could be a cash receipt sitting out in a batch that's not yet posted, even applied to an invoice, you would still get the credit limit warning. And so, you know, what can happen is you don't process the customer's order, and they become a little bit irate because you have their check, you've actually put it in the system, for whatever reason it just hasn't been posted, and so that's not really fair to the customer to slow down the sale, and you're the one selling, you don't want to stop the sale, especially, you know, if you've got their money. So so now in 2016 R2, what the software will do is not throw up that message. It'll look back to batches that are not yet posted and see if there's a cash receipt, and if it's applied to an outstanding invoice, then the system will assume that that will eventually post, and you won't get the you know, the warning message that they've gone over their credit limit. And so which kind of makes sense if you think about it. So if we have their money, we just haven't got it into our system yet, not really fair to penalize them or slow down this order. The next one, a little less probably important, but if you do use the fixed asset module, today you can't put a suffix in for a fixed asset. The software will decide if a suffix is needed. You can't actually key into that field, and so some people find that a little bit annoying. Well, with 2016 R2, you'll be able to actually key that field, and so it'll go from really just a Dynamics used field to a user editable field. And so if you want to add a suffix to a particular asset, you'll be able to tab over there and actually type into that field. So if you don't use fixed assets, that means absolutely nothing, but if you do, that could be, again, a fairly simple thing, but kind of a big deal in the fixed asset module. The next item, which is the beginning of a series of these types of things, this is the General Ledger Journal Transaction screen, which will look familiar to most. Again, kind of a simple thing, but it's like, oh yeah, that would have been good to do a number of years ago as well. When you open the journal entry window to actually key in, or if you open the journal entry inquiry window, the scrolling part of the window, so down towards the bottom where we put the account number and the debit and the credit, so the actual kind of meat of the transaction, that will either open expanded, so you can see in this case all three lines of information, so the account, the description, and the distribution reference if we're using it. That will open the way that you see mine with it expanded, or if you don't normally care to look at the expanded part of the window, your setting could be to open it compressed, and so where you're actually seeing more transactions with less detail versus more detail and fewer transactions on the window without scrolling. It is a per user setting, and there's nothing actually that, sorry about that, there's nothing actually that you have to do. It just remembers your prior setting, and so there's not a setup box or a check mark or something that has to be done. If you use the window like this and you close or save the window with it expanded, it'll remember that. The next time you come into either the entry window or the inquiry, it'll open it expanded. If you compress the scrolling part of the window down at the bottom and you close or save the window, the next time you go in, it'll open compressed. And so we'll see here in a minute that that actually carries through to sales and purchasing as well. And so again, just kind of some time savers, not anything that is adding, you know, a huge module or anything like that, but just some nice performance and productivity gains here. The next is the purchase order to fixed asset link, and so again, if you don't use either one of these or you don't buy fixed assets and designate them through Dynamics GP, then this will have absolutely no value. But if you do, this another could be a large one. So we have a setup option now in fixed assets to actually include sales tax or use tax, as the case may be, as part of the acquisition cost when we're actually purchasing a fixed asset or a capital asset through the system. And so you'll see my orange, yellowish, I guess it is, arrow there on the setup screen on the left, and you'll see a new checkbox to include tax in the actual acquisition cost. And so then when you come over to the fixed asset screen, if there was sales or use tax added to the invoice, today the fixed asset system ignores that. Now it'll actually include that, but you'll notice that there is a checkbox on the right here where my mouse is. There is a checkbox to actually, even though in our setup we say to include it, if for some reason on this particular asset we don't want to include tax, we can uncheck this and not have that picked up, or the system will actually calculate the tax based on our sales tax setup information or use tax setup information. We can get Dynamics to actually calculate the tax that you know, we will eventually pay. So because sometimes people don't charge us tax and we have to go on the honor system and actually calculate and remit the use tax ourselves, and by that time sometimes the asset is already set up and we've started depreciation, and now in this case, my example here, we've got a couple of $1,000 of tax that really technically should have been part of the cost of the asset, but it's been missed or omitted. And so we can have GP calculate the use tax for the most part and add that into the cost of the asset for us, and then we have a more GAAP compliant capitalization policy here. Okay, next on the list is kind of back to the purchase order when we cancel a line item and that purchase order stemmed from a requisition. And so now when you go back into the requisition, if you were the one requesting and you open your requisition, you see a visual cue here in the icon where the requisition is linked to the purchase order. You see a red slash through that, meaning that it's no longer linked. And so changes to the PO then flow back to the requisition, telling the requester that this is not coming. So it might have been approved, you might be on Easy Street here and you're waiting for your 10 100 XLGs, but somewhere along the line this is not going to actually happen. It's not going to be fulfilled. And it doesn't mean that somebody from our side decided, well, you shouldn't be buying it. It's more likely that the vendor can't fulfill the purchase order. And so this funnels that message with this visual cue back to the original requester that for whatever reason it's not going to happen. So next here is Power BI. So you probably have all heard of Power BI, probably no one really using it yet, or very, very few people using it, although it is a very powerful tool. It is relatively new from Microsoft, and so I think we've got some Power BI events, webinars actually coming up sometime this year, so you might want to watch for those if this is of interest. But Power BI can be hooked to the Dynamics GP homepage, and so much like we might have had our SSRS reports through Business Analyzer, and if you use Business Analyzer today, you know that that's really just kind of a wrapper around a number of SQL reporting reports that we may be using or may have created or edited what Microsoft has done and bundled together into the Business Analyzer. And of course we can link that into our homepage, so if we are a Dynamics GP user, that we have those reports available to us on our homepage. Well, Power BI is starting to, I wouldn't necessarily say be a complete replacement to the SQL reporting services reports, but a lot of people probably will migrate to it at some point because it is a little more powerful than what the SSRS report engine is. And so the Power BI reports can also be hooked to our Dynamics GP client, so when we open GP we can see our Power BI reports if we've gone that direction. This feature actually adds Power BI to the web client, and so if you're using the Dynamics GP web client to access the system, we can get our Power BI reports now in our web client homepage like we can in the desktop client. And so they've been on the desktop client. I think in 2015 R2 Power BI was added, and so that's been there. This is not affecting that. It's just adding it into our web client. If you're running payroll, and realize not a lot of people, not everybody is for sure. We only have about 300 or 350 customers that actually run payroll in Dynamics GP. But if you do, this is again kind of a long overdue type feature. When you print your W-2s, the screen on the right you'll recognize. It's been this window for many, many years. But there is a new form now where you can actually pick the one-wide forms with box, and Dynamics GP 2016 R2 will now produce a printed W-2 with the lines drawn on it. And so the smaller box on the left where the W-2 form is will actually be produced directly from the system. And so we no longer have to necessarily purchase and print on the lined forms. We don't make the pink and white form, so copy A, that actually gets sent in. Dynamics will not make that, but the idea here is if you electronic file your W-2 forms and your W-3, that you don't need to purchase any forms now because we send the originals in electronically to Social Security Administration, and we print the employee, and if we want to print a file copy for whatever reason to keep in our file, we can print all of those forms directly from GP and not have to actually go to Office Depot or wherever we buy forms and purchase the W-2s. And so a simple thing again, but a very popular request over the years is, why doesn't GP actually make me a W-2? And so they do that now. Okay, so project accounting, again, not used by everyone, but a big request in project was the ability to know if people that are working on projects have actually put their time in. And so, you know, if you have people that are putting time that will actually be billed, so kind of time and materials type jobs or projects set up, sometimes it's hard to tell if everybody has their time in for the week or for the 2-week period, and you want to sit down and do billing, but you don't really know, does everybody have their time in? And of course we don't want to generate invoices to send out to customers if we're missing a couple of timesheets. And so there is a new report, brand new now on the menu, that will look at the people assigned to projects that are active on working on projects and look to see if they've submitted time for the period that we run this. And so, you know, if we do weekly billing or every other week billing, the software will go through and look at all the jobs with active people, and if somebody is missing a timesheet, it'll alert us to that. So if there's a problem, if there's time on hold, or if for some reason a timesheet has been rejected, so we've put time in through the employee self-service user, so in other words using GP to allow our timekeepers to log in and just capture their time and expense and not have full access to the software. If we do that and use the workflow then to approve that time or approve those expenses, then the report will pick those up as well. And so you see I've got a number of scenarios here. Down at the bottom I've got a rejected timesheet. Doesn't tell me why it's rejected, it just says that Adam Barr's timesheet here has been rejected by Gregory Erickson, who is the approver way over there on the right side of the report. And so kind of as the administrator, more the accounting person or maybe the billing person, I can see that I'm not quite ready to generate my invoices yet because I still have a lot of things going on with the timesheets for this particular period. And so so this will be very, very helpful if you do use project accounting and capture time. Next, also along with project accounting, right now today, if you put time in, which is the data entry screen there in the background, all of that got coded to one set of general ledger account numbers. And so it didn't matter which you know, job I worked on or the cost category or the type of work I was doing, we really had one kind of journal entry being created for this time. And a lot of times that's okay. It might be going into a work in process kind of inventory account until we bill it. So, you know, that was all right because the timesheet is designated individual by individual, so employee by employee. We could control the posting by the employee, which was okay, but again, all these line items went to one particular place. So now in 2016 R2, we actually have the ability to control the GL posting at the line item level. And so my project number, the very first line there, the hotel ledger project, in the design phase, we might want to go to one set of accounts, and you can kind of see that over here when I click on the line distributions button for that line that's highlighted. So you see here I've opened the design cost category. I have the ability to toggle the GL accounts. Of course, they're going to default in based on my setup, but I could actually change those if I have the security, where when I open the review cost category or the consulting cost category, I might want those to drive to another set of general ledger account numbers. And so that's a very powerful thing for project accounting. And again, it's like, oh yeah, that's I hadn't thought of that, but that's a really cool feature to have if we actually enter time in projects. And so that will make a lot of project accounting folks happy. One little thing here on Management Reporter, and it's not huge, but it is kind of a big thing if you use MR, is you can now actually open the reports in a secured browser, so HTTPS is now supported, where prior to this or today it only worked in in HTTP. And so if you're on the IT side, that will bring a smile to your face. If you're on the accounting side, you probably don't really care. But this is kind of a nice thing that we can access reports over a secured connection. And so security is always top of mind, it seems like in everything that we're all doing today. The system today allows you to pay a vendor invoice with a credit card, and if you've done that, you know or realize that Dynamics GP moves the vendor transaction to the credit card vendor. And so here I've actually paid an invoice to Ace Travel, so I key it into the system as an open AP transaction to Ace Travel, but then I come along and say, well, you know what, I really want to move that to my American Express, and that not only buys me some more time to pay the actual bill, but if I get benefits off my company credit card like miles or points or whatever it might be, a lot of companies do that just to accumulate their credit card benefits. And so here I've paid Ace Travel with a credit card from Woodgrove Bank. And so that all worked, nothing new there, but it was sometimes kind of difficult to figure out when I go into Ace Travel. I say, oh, that was paid by Woodgrove Bank, Amex or Visa or MasterCard, whatever the credit card is. But it was really difficult to see the link between those if you came in from the bank or the credit card side. So if I look at Woodgrove Bank's vendor inquiry, all I see are these invoices paid. I don't really have a link back to which vendor I was actually moving the payment from. And so, if I just wrote a check to Woodgrove, that was one thing, but if Woodgrove was paying another vendor's invoice and then picking up the balance that now I owe Woodgrove Bank, there wasn't a real good link there. And so in 16R2, what Microsoft did was they actually inserted the vendor that is actually linked to this transaction. And so here, at a very quick glance, I can see that this particular invoice, so to speak now, to Woodgrove Bank really was a balance that was moved from Ace Travel. And so I paid Ace Travel's invoice, and now I have a balance due to Woodgrove instead of Ace Travel. And so they just inserted that into the description kind of header line there. And so again, kind of a simple thing, but this is really, really big if you deal with credit cards and trying to pay your other vendor invoices with your own company credit card. And of course, in doing that, they had to modify the GL to Payables reconciliation that opens up a nice, very nicely formatted Excel spreadsheet. They had to modify that to actually hook in that credit card information. And so when you see those transactions being matched, now you'll actually see that vendor, Ace Travel in this case, you'll actually see that on the GL for Payables reconciliation if you use that particular tool. Okay, so getting close to the end of the 20 here. We looked at the general ledger distribution window and how it opened when we did a general journal entry. And I had said that the same happens in sales and payables, so this really is the same idea. If we open the window and then OK or close out of it, it'll come back in open or expanded. If we compress it and then OK out of it or exit out of it, it'll be compressed the next time that we go in receivables and payables, just like it does in the general ledger. And so, and again, that's user by user, so we can all do kind of our own thing there. So nothing new, that's just was extended into sales transaction entry in SOP and payables transaction entry and is the inquiry windows as well. So if you use SafePay, currently the actual check name is pulled from vendor maintenance, and so which most of the time is fine. but occasionally you might write a check to this particular vendor, and for whatever reason the check name needs to be slightly different on this transaction only, and so you might change the check name when you do the transaction entry, and that's you know, doesn't happen a lot, but when it does, that was all well and fine, except if you were paying them electronically and or using the safe pay, or what the banks call positive pay feature. And then our positive pay file, our safe pay file, did not actually see the overridden check name that you put in at the transaction level. It actually pulled the check name from the vendor card, and so sometimes those would reject. So if your bank does a match on the actual name that the check was made out to, those would reject every time, and you'd have to deal with those as exceptions. And so now, if you do that and change the check name at the transaction level, the safe pay file will actually pick up that override and not go back to the actual vendor card. And so you see here, my check name on the vendor card is actually Ace Travel, but maybe they changed their name and I just found out about it. I haven't gone back to the vendor card and updated it, or I've already got a transaction in the system waiting to be paid, and so I go to that transaction and I fix it. So I type in a travel company as the correct name. Well, the safe pay file will pick up that transaction level override now. So again, a small thing, but it saves these from being rejected by the bank's positive pay system. Here, another kind of, gee, this should have been this way all along. If we deal with sales tax, and we have that on our sales invoices, the historical transactions, when we looked at those through the inquiry window or printed anything historical, if the sales tax rate had changed from the time this invoice was posted, I would actually get the changed sales tax rate, and so not the rate that was actually on the invoice. And so that was kind of drove people crazy, rightfully so. And so now they have split those, and so there's historical sales tax and current sales tax. And so when we print or otherwise view a historical sales transaction, it will actually show us the sales tax that was actually on the document, and so the sales tax that was in effect when we produced this document, when we posted it, instead of what the current tax rate is. And so some people called that a bug. It was done on purpose, so it was a feature. It's just nobody liked it, and so whatever Microsoft called it, it just wasn't quite the way it should have been. And so now this will save a little bit of grief in that the historical sales tax will be what it really was when you produce the invoice instead of what it is today. And so that's a fix, so to speak, to that feature. Last one or two here, SmartList favorites we can now protect. So if we make a SmartList favorite and save it and make it available to other users, someone else could go in and refavorite that, and so they might change it and update the favorite. Well, that's good for them. That doesn't help me if it was my favorite. And so now, if we have security, down at the bottom of the SmartList options window here, we can actually put a password on a favorite that we create and still make it available for other users to enjoy and use. But they can't go in and type over our favorite and resave it and make it something that is different than what we intended it to be. So they can create their own favorite, but they can't modify ours. Along with that, if we do use SmartList Designer, and so most of you know SmartList Designer is Microsoft's version of SmartList Builder, SmartList Builder being a product from a third party, and a very popular one. SmartList Designer is kind of an out-of-the-box solution that is very similar, not quite the same, but similar to SmartList Builder. If we create SmartList in Designer, make our own, in other words, we can now make those available in lookups. And so when we go into customers, vendors, items, accounts, employees, whatever it might be, we have the ability to see the SmartList Designer favorites now when we click on the little down arrow here right next to the lookups. So most of these will look familiar, where we can exclude inactives and so forth, but we can now get to our designer favorites. And so if we create something that really parses out the data that we like and that we really use a lot, those will be available when we do these lookups. And so that's a very nice thing to have in there. And I think the last one is more in payroll and human resources, more specifically, is Dynamics will now track historical termination and rehires. And so, you know, sometimes people come and go through our company, and in GP today, if they leave, we kind of have a date that they left, and we do have a rehire date, but there's only one. And so we don't have the ability really to, without overwriting those, we don't have the ability to really keep track of someone that might come and go during the course of a year or 2 or 5. And I know in some industries that's not uncommon. People will come and they'll work for a while, and then they might leave and go somewhere else because we don't have anything for them. And then we get something and we hire them back, and they're W-2 employees, but they're a little more transient than what we normally think of. And so there is a brand new window that's driven off the employee card. So if you go to the employee maintenance window, there is a new window now called Employment History Inquiry, and the system will now track and store all of those historical comings and goings when someone does join us and then leave, and rejoins us and leaves, and so on. And so that's kind of a nice feature if you do happen to use the payroll or the human resource module. That was a big issue that a lot of people have been looking for a number of years. And so with that, that is our 20, not 25 like the screen says, but about 20 new features in 2016 R2. Not a huge release again, but hopefully there's something in there for everyone. And if you'd like to talk about upgrading and what that might take, you can always contact your account manager or account executive, or let your consultant know, or if you're talking to a support person, let them know, and we can get you kind of to the right person that can talk about what it would take to get you onto 2016 R2. And so with that, Kim, I don't know if there's any questions in the chat or any kind of closing remarks that you'd like to make.
All right. Well, I apologize first for having technical difficulty. It seems to happen once in a while for me, so sorry about that, Brian. Again, I don't see any questions in the queue. What's a common question? I mean, for moving to R2, one thing I hear from users is it safe to go ahead and move to R2? And I've not heard of any problems with 2016 R2, even though that was released in November. What do you usually suggest to clients?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you've been on the software for a while and you've gone through a couple of upgrades, you probably recall that the upgrade process is pretty rock solid now. I remember 20 years ago when we did upgrades, you were kind of always holding your breath and walking on eggshells if the upgrade was actually going to be successful and kind of make it through to the new version. Most of them had some kind of problem, some of them not serious, but other times yes. Microsoft they've got that system down, and quite honestly, and upgrades that used to take a whole weekend now take a few hours. So I think as a general rule, you are very, very safe in continuing to upgrade to the new versions. Of course, if you have customization, you know, that's always something we have to look at and sometimes tweak a little bit to make sure that it works and recompile the code. You know, if you've got third parties, obviously we've got to make sure that they're compatible with what we want to do here, and so just those common sense things. But even so, you know, I would say that since 1985, there's not been a client that we could not successfully upgrade. Some of them take a little more effort, they're a little harder than others, but nowadays it's a very streamlined process, and so you should never really be afraid of making a move. What you don't want to do is get 4 or 5 versions back where you can't go directly from what you're on to what Microsoft is shipping. That makes it much more difficult / expensive if you do fall behind, and so you know that's really not the best place to be, and I realize that not everybody likes to upgrade to every version, but you know, even every other version is logical and acceptable, but you don't want to get, you know, again, that 3, 4, 5 versions, and then it can be done, of course, but then it becomes much harder and you have more downtime on.
Yeah, exactly. Very much. And you are really spending the same amount of money in the long run because you are paying for a couple of upgrades as well. So.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
And if you are unfamiliar with what version you're on and what it all means, do get in touch with your account manager. We've got some brochures that show 2015, 2016, 2016 R2, and what's beautiful about that is you can see not only does it get to be less expensive for you to upgrade, but there's a purpose behind it. And that's to get the latest enhancements, as Brian just went through. A number of great reasons to upgrade. So thank you so very much, Brian. Mm-hmm. All right, everybody. Well, thank you. No questions in the queue, so thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon. Thanks, Brian.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Kim. Bye.
Bye-bye.